IB Math has a well-earned reputation as one of the hardest high school math courses in the world. Not only does the content expand to cover topics that would normally only be introduced in the first year of university, but the IB's assessments also emphasize problem solving and independent inquiry to a degree that few other exam boards do. The goal of this video is to distill the lessons I've learned in my years as a student, a tutor, and now the co-founder of an education startup into practical tips you can use to study more effectively. I also want to give you an inside look into the IB's philosophy so you can better align your learning and optimize for exam success. If you're new to the channel, my name is James and I've been a tutor for IB Math for over 5 years since I completed my diploma in 2020. After earning my degree from Brown University in 2024, I co-founded Perplex.org with the mission of making effective, personalized learning available to every student. Since then, I've pored over every past paper since 2010, I've written thousands of exam-style questions, and I've also dug deeply into the science of how people learn math. So the advice I'm going to give you is both practical and evidence-based. In my experience, the most foundational thing that holds students back is a bad mindset, which is a combination of poor attitudes towards studying and incorrect assumptions about one's own math abilities. I've seen students go from getting 4s and 5s in the first year of the diploma program to earning a 7 on the final exam just by approaching their study with more confidence. That's why it's really important that you understand that you're not bad at math, but if you start with the belief that you are, you're not going to get very far. I've worked with students who have deep anxiety about their own math abilities, and I've seen them confidently solve a problem one day and the next be completely paralyzed with fear when working on the same problem. It's a very difficult thing to do, but if you can let go of your judgment of your own math abilities and instead embrace a genuine curiosity, I promise you'll be surprised by what you can accomplish. One thing that might help with that is accepting the fact that math is supposed to be difficult. In fact, if learning ever feels easy, it probably isn't working. I want you to think back to the last time you were working on a problem that you had no idea how to solve. It usually feels uncomfortable, if not painful, and I understand the feeling. But the truth is, that discomfort is evidence that your brain is under pressure, and that pressure is what your brain needs to grow. So try and lean into the discomfort because that's where learning sticks. It's also important that you stop treating practice like a checklist. I've seen far too many students scrolling through question banks and opening solutions to give themselves a false sense of security. But if you do this, you're not only going to retain very little, you're going to be left without the flexibility you need to adjust to the new types of problems that are going to show up on your exam. Instead, try and treat every practice problem and exercise like an opportunity to wrestle with mathematical ideas, because you're going to have to do it sooner or later. You can either do it a little bit every week over the course of 2 years, or try and cram it all into the last month and get the crap beaten out of you on the day of paper 1. What I'm suggesting is hard, which is why motivation is super important. Many students come to me and say, James, I'd like to get a 6 or maybe a 7. No, you have to decide as early as possible what grade you're going to get and commit to doing the work you need to get there. Whatever your reason is, whether it's university admissions or personal ambition, understand that you are in control of the outcome. That being said, I don't want you to grind yourself into the dust. Sleep is absolutely essential for your learning. And I know that it can be difficult to get 7 to 8 hours a night when you're managing a high workload and a lot of stress. So here are some tips that I use myself to try and prioritize sleep. Put away your phone at least an hour before bedtime. Try and eat your dinner earlier because going to bed on a full stomach makes it harder to fall asleep. Eliminate all caffeine at least 6 to 12 hours before bedtime and put a blue light filter on all your devices. If, like me, you still find yourself very stressed when you get into bed, put on a boring audiobook or a podcast. My personal suggestion is to listen to The History of Civilizations by Will Durant. Trust me. At the same time, make sure you don't neglect your social life. You should continue to spend time with your friends, even if that just means studying together a few times a week. Also, you shouldn't push away your parents. I understand that as a young adult, you want to have your independence, and sometimes it feels like inviting your parents into the process just adds stress. But the truth is, they care deeply about your success, and there are a lot of practical things they can do to help you along the way. All right, now that we've gotten that therapy session out of the way, let's talk about some practical tips you can use to study more effectively and get more out of your time in class. Because the bulk of your study is going to consist of in-class time, the most important thing you can do is show up and make a genuine effort, focus, and ask questions. You don't have to take notes, but if you do, make sure you paraphrase rather than trying to transcribe directly, as that doesn't lead to much retention at all. Also, even though it sounds a bit lame, if you know there are certain friends that you won't work constructively if you're sitting next to them, you should move seats as early as possible. It's also important that you treat every assignment seriously, whether it's graded or not. Every homework, quiz, or test that you have in class is an opportunity to practice and figure out where your weaknesses lie. Over time, you should be keeping track of where you consistently make mistakes so you can revisit certain topics and types of questions in your final study. When it comes to studying outside of class, consistency matters a lot more than quantity. At the start of each semester, try and sit down and look at your calendar. See where you have time, maybe during free periods or after class, to fit in 30 to 60-minute study sessions. Treat these like a routine and try your best to stick to them, but also don't beat yourself up if you fall off for a week or a few days at a time. So let's talk about study strategies that actually work. The first thing to understand is that fluency is not mastery, and that feeling you get after watching a YouTube video or rereading your notes is a very deceptive indicator and doesn't signal that you have true understanding. Instead, you should focus on things that feel hard and force you to solve problems and think deeply. Here are some specific strategies you can use to achieve that. The first strategy is active recall, which means putting away any resource except for your formula booklet and your calculator and trying to solve problems from memory. The second part of that is giving every problem a real, extended attempt before you look at the solution or ask for help. It's these combination of things that will force your brain to adapt and solve new problems. You should pick problems that truly challenge you, and don't view mistakes as failures, but rather as indicators of where you need to spend your energy. One concrete way to do that is to keep an error log, which means marking down every problem that you made a mistake on, that you found challenging, or in any way helped your learning. It's super helpful to have a collection of these that you can look back on when you're reviewing any topic. As you get closer to the final exams, your teacher may hand out some past papers, or you may already have found them online. I suggest that you save these for the final stretch of revision before your exams. These are an immensely useful resource for practicing real exams under timed conditions, and it would be a shame if you'd seen most of the questions in that practice beforehand. As an organization, the IB has very strong opinions about how math learning should work. The earlier you understand their philosophy and what they want from you, the better you can align your studies with their objectives and optimize for the assessments that you're going to have. The first thing to understand is that the IB is obsessed with problem solving. Every time I have a student starting the IB, I tell them up front that their final exam is going to contain many questions they won't have seen before. That's why it drives me mad when I receive messages on the day of paper one telling me that the exam was nothing like what they expected and they had no idea how they could have studied better. The point is, memorizing formulas and practicing basic questions is not going to get you to the finish line. You really have to get used to doing hard problems that force you to become a better problem solver. The IB also expects that you're proficient in using your graphic display calculator. I've seen so many students who have a very good conceptual mastery of the syllabus, but who are not good enough at using their calculator and therefore underperform in certain sections of the exam. I strongly suggest that you purchase a suitable graphic display calculator early in the diploma program and get comfortable using it as you go along. Now, we're going to make a more detailed video about the internal assessment later, but for now I want to give you a high-level overview of what it's about. The IB's goal with the IA is to give you more ownership in the mathematical process. What that means is, beyond knowing how to solve problems, the IB wants to see that you're capable of asking good questions and developing a chain of thought and writing a mathematically rigorous paper. The best IAs are the ones that take math that you've learned in the syllabus and pull it in some way into your life in a scenario that you find interesting and compelling. It's also really important to remember that even though your teacher is going to be the first one to mark your IA, there's a good chance it's going to be externally moderated. So all of your personal effort and your interest has to be evident in what you've written and not just obvious to your teacher by conversations that you've had. I've given you a lot of information, and I know that this can be overwhelming because it's exactly the reason that we founded Perplex. The goal of our platform is to take the burden of all of this planning and organization off of you so that you can focus on the math, which, let's be honest, is hard enough as it is. On perplex.org, you'll find the most detailed notes anywhere on every topic, as well as interactive animated lessons for every subject that you might be struggling with. We also have over 1,000 IB-style questions that you can practice on, and they're conveniently organized by topic and by difficulty. If you tell us what you're studying and which things you've yet to cover, we can tailor the resources to you so you always know what's going to be most effective for your learning and what to do next. If you thought this video was helpful, please like and subscribe. We're constantly working on new content to help IB students succeed. And if you have any questions, please shoot them in the comments below and I'll try my best to get back to you. Good luck studying, and I'll see you next time.